Welcome to another episode of the Hospitality Mentor Podcast. And today I'm very excited for this one because it's different than what we normally do. But we've got Scott Colbourne, the founder of Pickle Stars, here with us today. Scott, welcome to the show.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and looking excited to talk about pickleball and all things hospitality.
I love it. Well, I want to get started here. Usually we start with our first question, which is your first job in hospitality, but I want to give people, to get to know what you're working on now. So why don't you tell us like 30, 45 seconds what you're working on now, and we'll work our way towards it.
Sure thing. So right now I'm working on Pickle Stars. Pickle Stars is a new company in the pickleball and hospitality space. We're designed specifically for resorts, hotels, hospitality brands. There's a lot of hype and a lot of energy around pickleball right now. There's not a lot that's focused specifically on the needs of resorts and hotels, and that's been my world for the past 20 years. And I'm excited to bring the Pickle Stars energy, enthusiasm, and expertise to the hospitality world.
I'm excited about it because I live here in Miami and I see paddle, I see pickleball, I see tennis, I see all these racket sports. I need your help maybe explain to me what the difference is in some of them because I'm trying to get involved a little bit and I don't want to embarrass myself. So hopefully you can help me with that as we get going here.
Yeah, sure thing, Steve. Well, they're all similar, and there's a bat and ball, or paddle, or racket and ball, and they all are played on a court. Outside of that, they've all got a net, so there's some good similarities there. Pickleball is hugely popular in the United States right now. It's extremely easy to play, extremely sociable, and really, really fun. Paddle is growing in the US. Definitely, you're in South Florida. It's the hotbed of paddle in the US. It's globally, it's a huge sport, and it's definitely growing in the USA. Takes a little more space than what pickleball does, and it's a little bit harder to install from a physical area perspective. So that's halting its growth a little bit in the US compared to pickleball. But pickleball is extremely easy to set up courts and is really space efficient. And then obviously tennis is the classic racket sports. It's been around for almost 150, 200 years now, and everyone knows and is experiencing some growth now as well. We've got the US Open of tennis coming up. We've got the US Open of paddle coming up, the US Open of pickleball coming up. So there's a lot of fun stuff in all the racket sports, and I do play them all, and I think they're all great in certain aspects.
Well, I love it, and I'm excited to get into this journey of yours and talk more about those sports and which ones you're focusing on. But let's get started here. What was your journey in racket sports? How did you get started in this industry? And I'm excited to talk about your whole journey here. But how did you get started?
Sure thing. Well, I'm from New Zealand originally. I grew up in a rural area of New Zealand, and there was a tennis club across the street. And I would walk across the street, and they would clear the sheep off the tennis courts on a Friday afternoon and mow the grass, and they'd play tennis on the weekend. And so I started doing that on a grass court in New Zealand. And then as I went through high school, started to coach some lessons part-time to make a little bit extra money, and then continued that in college. My first hospitality job, I didn't realize at the time, but was actually working in a gas station. New Zealand has full service gas stations, and that was a
Very
great
nice.
upbringing. I started at the age 13, and I had to talk to customers a lot. And that was really how I learned to converse with adults. And looking back, that was a great grounding. And then on the tennis court, that helped me a lot, being comfortable talking with customers. And I eventually transitioned to living in the US in the early 2000s. At the time, I was working in a summer kids camp. And then a couple of jobs later, I started working at a resort. And that was really my first foray into tennis at a resort and the world of hospitality. I was extremely fortunate to be able to undertake some of the training programs at the different resorts I worked at. I worked at Omni Hotels, I worked at Ritz-Carlton's, I worked at Four Seasons, and it was great to be able to go through some of their training programs and really learn all about hospitality.
Yeah, I want to get to those hotels, and I want to kind of go rewind a little bit because I like going on this journey and seeing how things kind of take shape. So you're in high school, you're playing tennis. Do you go play at university somewhere tennis, or are you doing something different after high school?
Sure. So one of my goals as a child was to go to America on a college scholarship. I had this set of encyclopedias as a child, which I loved, and they're all about America. And so I came over to Indiana in the year 2000 and lived in Indiana. That was quite a cultural shock
Yeah,
compared to
Pat.
New Zealand.
Mhm.
Uh, and I spent a year in Indiana before moving back to New Zealand to finish my college education in New Zealand.
Why Indiana? Was it the university or just because that's the most like central, middle, landlocked place there is?
Yeah, so it might be hard for some of our listeners to comprehend, but at the time I was recording VHS tapes on a big cassette, and I was sending them via the mail, FedEx or UPS or whatever it was at the time, across from New Zealand to the United States to try and pitch college coaches on recruiting me. There was no YouTube back then. Email was dial up. It was very
I
slow,
see.
and it was really difficult to get recruited to come to the US. And that was one of the few schools that was recruiting me, and it seemed like a good opportunity, and so I took it. And I think that's a common story with athletes coming to the USA for college sport. You're not really sure where you're going to go or where you're going to end up.
And so you're in Indiana, not your cup of tea, it looks like. Head back home. And so you're, there was something I was looking up on your notes here is that, you spent some time kind of being a backpacker, and you even have it listed as like, that's what I was doing for 3 years.
Yeah,
And
so
so
yeah,
tell me about that. Was that after university, after playing tennis?
so when I finished university, all I knew that I didn't want to get a quote unquote real job, and I wanted to live in the USA. And it's not easy to get the correct legal visa to work in the USA. I was able to pick up a summer coaching job in the United States in New York. And essentially, I would come to the US in June, July, and August, and then spend the other 9 months of the year working out a way to try and get back. So I worked in a bank in Ireland in customer service, lived in Dublin. I backpacked through Central America, backpacked through parts of Asia. I worked on a mine site in Western Australia. I worked on a construction site in Hawaii, lots of various different jobs. Spent a lot of time in New Zealand during that time as well. And it was a really enjoyable time traveling the world, experiencing lots of different countries, lots of different cultures, and it was a fun time in my life.
No, it sounds fun. And was there like times when you were on that kind of backpacking trip where you're like dreaming about what you want to do? Or was it more just like I'm living in the present and just I'm gonna enjoy this moment? Like how was that
So,
for you?
yeah, there was a pretty pivotal moment. I came back to New Zealand towards the end of that 3 years, and I started talking to a bank in New Zealand about working for them, and got lightly recruited and actually got offered a job in the end working for a bank. And at the time, I remember I spoke with my mother, and I also had an opportunity to go and live in East Hampton, New York, in the Hamptons, which is a hotbed of tennis.
Mhm.
And I spoke to my mother, and she at the time, I'm not sure if she regrets this or not, but she said, "You know what? The bank in New Zealand is always going to be there. You might not get another opportunity to go and work in the Hamptons for the summer." And so I took that opportunity, and I went and worked in the Hamptons for the summer coaching tennis, and that was a real pivotal step. I started working for a large club management company at the time, and that was kind of the first step away from backpacking into a more stable future career path.
So is that when really the tennis instructing kind of took off? Because that became a big part of your career. Was that the first step?
Yeah, for sure. So that became full time for me at that point. So previously, I was still doing it summers, part time, but that became the full time occupation for a number of years after that. And I started in Southampton, in East Hampton, New York. Moved to Miami, was in Miami and Fort Myers and Naples area, and that really led to me full time tennis coaching for a number of years.
So you join, is it the Cliff Drysdale Tennis uh,
That
company? Is
That's
that the
correct.
company
So
you
I
joined?
start yeah, that's correct. I started with Cliff Drysdale Management as a camp counselor
Mhm.
in that club in Southampton, New York.
Amazing. So you were with them and you're there for a long time, right? I think it's something like 15 years. Does that sound about right?
That's
So as you're
correct. Yeah.
there, how do you decide, all right, I'm making a career of doing this? Because you work at some great hotels, like you mentioned, you're working at resorts. How do you start to grow? Because you get to the very top of that company. What is it like when you start making those early decisions?
Sure. So I was very fortunate. I met the CEO of the Cliff Drysdale Management early on in East Hampton, and they offered me a job to live and work in Miami. And that sounded incredibly exciting, living and working in Miami. In some ways, I felt like I was still backpacking because it was fun and I was traveling for different events and different camps at different resorts. And so it was a lot of fun early on.
Where were you
Um,
living in Miami? Not to cut you off, just because this is our hometown here. Where were you at?
Yeah, I lived in Brickell. I lived in the Four Ambassadors building,
Oh,
which
right
is
there.
just off Brickell Key, overlooking the Mandarin Oriental.
Yeah, that's where I worked. So if you, what year were you there?
2008, I was there.
Yeah, so we were looking at each other. See, we didn't even know. We were right looking at each other from across the bay.
Yeah, yeah.
So you get started down there, and then how does it start to grow? Because you're teaching in Miami, you start moving to hotels, which was where it's like hooked, like, all right, I'm doing this.
S- So I was always eager to. when I was backpacking, I did have a lot of self confidence and do still have a lot of confidence, and I think that was attributed to my upbringing. My parents raised me to believe in myself, and it was a really positive. They did that, and I was always very motivated to move forward in whatever I was doing, whether it was having a better time backpacking or being a better tennis coach or moving ahead in the company I was working for. And so I spoke with the leadership at Drysdale Management and expressed my interest in getting ahead. And I think that was an important step. As I didn't just wait for an opportunity or wait for promotion. I actually, went to the leadership and said, I'm interested in doing this. How can I further my chances of doing that? And having those open dialogue really enabled me to progress in my career a number of times in those 16 years I was with them. Um, Early on, so towards the early 2009, I got offered a position in Vermont. And so it was maybe not a hotbed of tennis, but I took the opportunity to move to Vermont and spent 3 years in there working at Stratton Mountain Resort. Learned a lot about resorts and working in that environment, and there was a great education. That was my first director of tennis job, and that really kind of helped me move forward in my career.
So what is that like? Because it's one thing to kind of do your thing, have clients that come and coach people that are coming through a hotel, but once you have to manage people, it changes very quickly. And for a lot of people, it's a struggle at the beginning. Was it like that for you, or did you pick up on it pretty easily from being in teams and team sports?
I definitely been in team sports helped me. It was a great education. I was in my late 20s by that point, and at times had a staff of upwards of 15 to 20 in the summertime of varying ages. So we had staff that were as young as 16 and staff in their 50s, and that was definitely an education. I definitely made some mistakes during that time and managing and mentoring and educating associates that were working alongside me, and I was their supervisor. Definitely at the time I was follow my lead by example type leader. I was going to be there the earliest, leave the latest, and work the hardest, and that be the example. And if others did not fit with my example, then I wasn't afraid to let them know. And that maybe wasn't the best approach at the time. I've softened a little bit and learned a bit since then. But that was how I was as a mid-20s leader, and learned a lot and made some mistakes along the way.
Yeah. And so how did you continue to grow? Because a lot of times, all right, you get to that director level in a company, they start looking for outside people to come in to take up some of the higher roles. How did you continue to develop and
Yes.
further yourself?
So again, it was those conversations with the leadership, and at one point, I actually spoke with the CEO, and I said, "Oh, maybe I'm interested in going to the UK and traveling a little bit more." And he said, "Yeah, look, if you want to do that, you can do that, but just know that once you kind of step off the ladder, you've stepped off the ladder." And then not that long after that, an opportunity came up to move to Florida. To work at the Omni Amelia Island Resort. At the time, it was under construction, and they had a reimagination project occurring, and so that was exciting. So at that point, my wife and I moved to Florida and started a new life there, and that was definitely another big step. Is working in a resort of that caliber, of that size, that many keys, a large property with a homeowners association, a community association, hotel rooms, villas. There was a lot happening there, and there was a great education there, and that came from me putting my hand up with the leadership and saying I'm really interested in this position. And that set off the next kind of 4 or 5 years of good education in that world.
So what was it like when you get to this place? I know that place, I know that resort, it's amazing and very high standards. And you kind of running that program, what was it like? Did you have to go through hotel orientation? Were you involved with the hotel, or was it kind of like,
Yeah.
hey, we're in our own world out here on the courts?
So I think this is a good lesson for everybody working in the hotel environment. Is you have direct associates of the hotel brand, whatever brand that might be. Then you have third-party contractors. You have employment companies that are kind of temporary staffing. But at the end of the day, the general manager or the managing director, they want everybody to be swimming together and appearing the same and providing the same level of service. And I always said, I never want it to become a us versus them time environment. I don't want anyone to think that I work for somebody differently. We're all here to, service the guest needs. And so the Omni Hotels Corporation was fantastic at including us in that. And that was really great. When we first got there, the hotel was under construction. So it was a slow first
Mhm.
winter. Um, and at the time, they were doing about $70,000 a year in revenue in the tennis program. And when I left, it was upwards of 700,000 a year in the tennis program. So we had an incredible team over a number of years that were built there. And it definitely was not just me. We had a large team every year that helped grow it, both on the coaching side and also the hotel management and the fitness center there that helped support the team on the court. So it was a great education.
And so as you keep moving up, are you still based out of that Omni Hotel as you become a VP of operations, or are you starting to move around some more again?
So yeah, during that time again, I went to my supervisor, the CEO of Cliff Drysdale, and said I'm interested in doing more. And I was able to work on a pitch for Cliff Drysdale to pitch Omni Hotels to expand the partnership from one resort to multiple resorts. I learned a lot on that, directly pitching the executive leadership of Omni Resorts. And sometimes you've only got 6 or 7 minutes to impress someone and get your pitch
Mhm.
across, and so that's a good challenge to go through. And over time, Cliff Drysdale management did pick up more resorts, and I became the leader of that resort division. So at one point, there was 17 resorts reporting
Wow.
directly to me. I was still living in Amelia Island, Florida, but traveling a lot to these different resorts, opening different resorts, hiring them, the tennis staff for them. And so again, it was a fantastic opportunity to see a lot, experience a lot, and also be around a lot of great leaders, experience a lot of great hotel general managers, and learn from them.
So how do you keep those standards in place, right? Because I can already tell you like to keep things organized. You got to make sure things are high level. Now you got 17 resorts running different programs. For someone listening now, because there's a lot of people who take that next step and they just get overwhelmed. They're like, what is happening? How did you kind of keep in everything in line?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, Steve, it is a lot trying to do that. And I first admit I didn't do it perfectly. But there's a couple of things that I think help. One is you've really got to rely on feedback, and there's different areas of feedback. I focused on any feedback you can get from guests, and then any financial numbers feedback, and then the feedback from the hotel directly, and then your own intuition. And you try and put those 4 pieces together, because when you're managing, this is managing staff remotely before the pandemic, when managing staff remotely wasn't really a thing. But it's quite common in the hotel world where a VP of Ops oversees multiple locations.
Hmm.
And so you've got to really correlate those 4 areas: guest feedback, hotel feedback, financial feedback, and your own intuition to make good decisions. And a lot of checklists, is this done? Is this done? Is this done? And a wise mentor one time by the name of Doug Cash gave me advice that the first time you let a standard slip, that standard becomes the new standard.
I
And
like that.
it's inevitably the lower standard. And so that stuck with me. So you got to keep the standards high and not let them slip. And I'd be guilty of, telling people a little too firmly when they weren't up to standards. And then over time, learn to maybe show them and tell them in a different manner. But the key is keeping those standards and not letting them slip.
That's a great one. If you rewind this for 30 seconds, if you were listening to that, that's a great quote. I think a lot of us should steal it. I'm going to steal it now for my companies that we've got, because we've had some standard issue in our hospitality company. So I'm using that one. But you do a good job, right? Like, yes, we are learning on as we go, but you continue to do a good job because you keep getting promoted, man. You keep moving on up. You become chief operating officer of this company next, and you have to make a move, it looks like, to Texas. Was that something that was a hard talk to have with your wife? Was it, because you have to have some support when you're making all these moves in hospitality? What was that like?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my wife has been fantastic the entire journey. So we met in Vermont at the resort, and then I was fortunate enough for her to agree to move to Florida, and then we had the hard conversation, and she agreed to move to Texas as well. So without her, I couldn't have done anything that I've done professionally or personally. She's been super supportive and helpful, and looks after the entire family while I'm working hard to provide for us. Um, when the opportunity came to Texas, that coincided with Cliff Drysdale Management being purchased by Troon. Troon's the largest golf course and club management company
Yeah.
in the world.
Hmm.
And that brought a whole new level of rigor and standards and systems that need to be put in place. And I spoke with the leadership again and said, I think I'm ready for this type of opportunity. And that opportunity was provided to me. So we moved to Texas. And it was a big challenge for me personally to, when you're at a resort and you have true customers in front of you, you're dealing with them every day, and you get the feedback and you get the gratification of, oh, I produced this event, or this person had this amazing stay, and there's still a mix of customers and associates in there. When I moved to Texas, I no longer had customers, and that mentally took a little bit of a while to adjust to. My customers became the associates, and I
Mhm.
never dealt with true customers. And I didn't really enjoy that at first, and took a while to adjust to, and had to adjust to in the new role. But the previous feeling of I've had a good day because I've made someone else's day, or I've had a good day because we produced a good event, that was gone because I was not no longer working with true customers.
And how do you? Because once you're at that executive level, that chief executive level, right? Because you do get promoted again after a couple of years, so you continue to crush it there. You get to that CEO level. What was that like for you? Because you get to the peak of a company, you're sitting in that chair where you kind of like pinching yourself, like, "Wow, I got all the way to the top of this," or was it like a different feeling? What was it like for you when you got there?
It was immensely satisfying, and it's a great journey and a story to reflect on now. When people ask what I previously did, and I started as a camp counselor and finished as the CEO, and we went from 4 clubs to 65 clubs in 14 countries. So it was fantastic. Um, I would say towards the end there, the overwhelming feeling was one of uh, everything is my responsibility. And even if someone 3 or 4 places down in the leadership structure, made a mistake, I felt like it was my responsibility because we didn't put the right training in place, we didn't put the right system in place, or if we did, we didn't enforce the adherence with it. And so I really tried to take on that type of leadership role of ultimate, responsibility. If something goes wrong, it's my fault. I didn't necessarily cause it directly, but I can help fix it. I can help educate it. And so, when you're dealing with that many associates and that many locations, and then the pandemic's happening, there's a lot of responsibility. And, luckily we had a great team alongside me on our leadership team at Cliff Drysdale. The majority of the team had been there 10 plus years, and I've been through a lot with them. And so there was a lot of support and help. It definitely was not me alone. And it was a great, great place to be.
Yeah, it's incredible because not many people have that journey. That's what's very cool about we talked about this earlier. It is hospitality. You're in the hospitality industry. You start from a camp counselor to become a chief executive of this major company. And now, things change in life and you decide to make a move. What happens? How does that happen? Because a lot of people don't leave that company. They never take that next step out. They stay with that company for their entire career. What did you do? How did you make that decision to leave and what did you do?
Sure. So, growing up, I felt like I was quite entrepreneurial, and had a few different things going on in the summers of high school and summers of college, different businesses at the same time, all manner of strange jobs. And then when I came to the US, I didn't feel like that opportunity was really there. I needed to focus on working for a company, and that company would support me and I would support them. And it worked out fantastic for 16 years. And that company sponsored my different visas to become legal to work in the country, and that was really my true focus. I never really was able to scratch that entrepreneurial itch again, and never felt like I wanted to. Um, I would say the last year or two with Cliff Drysdale, I felt like, okay, I'm now in my 40s, and if I want to do something different, then now's the time to do it. I've still got a lot of energy and passion, and now's a good time to move on and do that. The company had also gone through some pretty big transitions and some big projects, and so I felt like the timing was right for me to leave, and the company I knew would be in good hands moving forward with the other leaders in that leadership group. And so originally I set out and moved to a company called Tennis Resorts Online. So that is a TripAdvisor or a Yelp style company focused on tennis and resorts. Now,
Mhm.
I'd known that company for quite a while. They rate and review tennis resorts. So I joined Tennis Resorts Online as the CEO. And then over the past 15 months now, with the ownership group of Tennis Resorts Online, started to look at different opportunities, see where things are heading with tennis and paddle and pickleball, and what can we expand Tennis Resorts Online to be. And so from a lot of those conversations, pickleball kept on coming back. Uh, and I was getting a lot of inbound from other hospitality leaders about pickleball. What can we do with pickleball at a resort? Can you help me out with that? Can we talk with you somehow? And um, Pickle Stars really was the evolution of that. And you can't have a pickleball company called Tennis Resorts Online. So we launched Pickle Stars, with the goal of providing pickleball services in a consulting manner to hotels and resorts.
So how does those conversations? Is it just because a lot of people don't make that transition? They're like, all right, we'll just stay as the online review company. We're here in the online world, but now you're transitioning into the physical world of creating things. How does that start to happen? Right? Is it just because you're getting multiple phone calls? Wow, there's something here. There's an opportunity. Let's look into it. Or was it just something that you knew should happen?
Yeah, I think anybody who's been in any sort of working environment will come back to their network and the contacts that they've made, both in the company they're in and also companies and people they've worked with. And I think that um, all associates should really lean into their network and take advantage of that. And when you are making a transition, talk to people in that network. And especially in hospitality, where so many people get promoted so quickly in different positions, and they go to a different company, and then you might be in a really intense time period opening a resort with them for 3 months and not see them for 5 years, but they're still part of your network. And so with Tennis Resorts Online, there was a lot of inbound coming to the
Mhm.
company and also coming to me, just being in a public place on LinkedIn, people reaching out saying, we'd love to do something with you, how can you help us with this? And so again, felt like it was the right time to offer these services in a formal manner, and so that was why we launched Pickle Stars.
So are you just consulting now? So let's say I'm at a hotel and I've got a nice resort and I've got some area and people love pickleball. Do I call you and you help consult do it, or is it going to be more of like what you were doing with your previous company, where you come in and run the whole thing for us? What is it like?
Sure. So we're going to be in a consulting environment. So we can provide events and experiences, but more so training, advice, construction, setup. We've already consulted on a number of new build projects of pickleball. That's happening a lot right now. Is resorts and hotels want to put in courts, but they don't know if they've got the space. They don't know how to do it. They might not be sure if they can put it in permanently. We've got some pop-up options, working with different court manufacturers. So it's really a consulting role for these resorts, and also for the brands. There's a lot of hotel brands wanting to do pickleball but aren't sure where to start.
Mhm.
And it does have some nuances that make it different from tennis, and obviously a lot different from just a regular hotel associate.
So without giving all your secrets away, because we still want people to call you, we want Pickle Stars to do well. Let's say I run a vacation rental company, so I'm a hotel guy. I'm also in the vacation rental world. We've got 50 or so properties that we manage, but now we're really looking for outdoor experiences. Can someone like with a big backyard, how much space would I need to really create a pickleball kind of pop up
Yeah,
amenity
sure.
for these homes?
Yeah. Um, I would say the minimum space you want is 30 feet by 60 feet. That's going to give you enough space for a court and some surrounding areas. And then, you know, happy to share that as much as the court is important, it's the surrounding area that's just as important. So if you've got a waiting area, if you've got some shade, some tables, if you can run water or electricity there, that would be even better than maybe to put a refrigerator there or maybe a sink there and have a bit of a party zone going on. Because as sociable as pickleball is, you want to also encourage that social engagement. So having tables, chairs nearby, so you've got 4 people playing, a bunch of people watching. That's really important to the overall pickleball experience.
I didn't think about that. See, learned something here already. So as you're talking to hotels, they're always asking the similar query. What's the ROI going to be on this? All right, I'm going to invest in this court. How am I going to see this return? What are you telling some of these hotels? I'm sure they're already asking you this
Yeah.
question. What are you telling
Sure, sure. So with every hotel, it's a slightly different conversation. We all know hotels are very revenue driven, EBITDA driven, ROI driven. And so it's an education of how the hotel wants to manage the amenity financially. So if the hotel is happy to charge for the amenity, so happy to charge for a court fee, then there's a good chance they're going to get a positive ROI. If the hotel wants to bundle the amenity into their existing resort fee or amenity package fee, then unless they carve that money out of the P&L, it's going to be really hard for them to see an ROI on that court, because they're essentially not recording any revenue on that. So, and it depends on the price point of the resort. You might be $1,000 a night and resort fee covers everything. It might be 150, 200 a night and resort fee doesn't cover as much. So those are kind of the key conversations you have early on, and help educate the hotel company and see how they want it. There's also companies out there that recognize we need to have this amenity. We can't provide it very well in-house right now. We need some outside expertise to help us with this. And so I'm more than happy to have a group come in and help educate and train their existing staff, or to help them find staff to execute on the program.
Is there a property you think is like doing this really well? Like, all right, you should go look at this and how they're doing it. Is there someone that stands out in your mind right now?
That's a great question, Steve. There are a number of great pickleball locations that are out there right now that are doing a really nice job with it. Bahama in the Bahamas is one that stands out as a really good example of a location that put in pickleball courts and is doing really well out of it. Key Island Golf Resort in South Carolina is doing a really good job with it. So it's definitely possible to do it. The key factor is you actually put some thought into it. It's not just, let's just put the court out there and see what happens. I've had the fortune of visiting Le Logis, which is the Forbes Travel Guide Center of Excellence in the south of France. They have two amazing pickleball courts, the first ever courts in France. And they're doing a fantastic job with pickleball in the most luxurious setting you can imagine.
It sounds fun. So that's where I need to go. I need some more of those. Well, I'm here in Miami and I'm seeing pickleball really is picking up. Paddle is in a lot of places, but not many of the hotels have really embraced it yet. There's some that are really big and have enough space to do it. What would you tell them really to kind of consider? Like, how do you just get started? Is it just giving you a call? Is it measuring the space? What should they be thinking about as they're
Yeah.
to kind of get them thinking about this? Because they should. Like they would do well with it, I believe, some of these big resorts.
Yeah, definitely. The first step is to, go on our website, picklestars.net, and give me a call, and we can set up a video chat. And the first thing we do is look at your property on a Google Maps. We'll look at it on an aerial view and start to plan out some spaces. And then we'll talk about what existing space you might have. It might be a ballroom. It might be a patio you hadn't considered before. It might be a rooftop of a parking structure. There's plenty of different options where you can put one court in. It could be indoors in a foyer. There's many different ways to do it. And so I would just say, don't think, I don't have tennis courts, I can't do this, or I don't have the space, it can't happen. There's pop-up locations you can put down for a couple of hours or a couple of days, couple of weeks, or a few months. So it doesn't have to be a permanent structure. I would just say that think creatively, and we can help you put in pickleball almost anywhere.
I love it. All right, so I've got one last question for you here. If you were talking to young Scott and he was starting out his journey again today, what advice are you giving to young Scott?
I would say that I'm really happy with where the journey's taken me, Steve. I did never for a minute thought when I was growing up in New Zealand, or almost at any step along the way, what I would be doing in the future. I could never imagine what was around the next corner. But when you take that step forward, then you're able to see a little bit higher. So if you think about a staircase, you go up a step, you can see something you didn't see before. So I'd say don't be afraid to take a step forward, because you never know what the future's going to hold. And then I would also say, don't let yourself be boxed in by what the title of the job might be. I remember thinking about certain job when I was younger and thinking, oh, maybe that sounds like a boring job, but it's all about the environment that you're in. I think that can make it interesting and exciting. And so, many different resort opportunities out there that are exciting in all different fields, whether it's accounting, F&B, culinary, banquets, activities, recreation, tennis, pickleball, paddle. So don't be bothered by the title so much. Just take a step forward, and new opportunities will be out there.
Love it. That's great advice. And I think for anyone listening, you can definitely take something away from that. So, Scott, if somebody wants to make their pickleball dreams come true, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. The best way to get in contact with me is at PickleStars.net. You can see all of our offerings there. I'm readily available on LinkedIn, or you can email me info@PickleStars.net.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for joining us. I love learning about what you're creating. I think you're onto something special, and I'm excited to have some more of these hotels pick up this pickleball because I want to go play them at my favorite hotels. But thanks again.